When and why did I join the Corinthian? 1984. I had first sailed out of Corinthian in 1967, but this happened in 1984. I had built a boat that I wanted to put on a mooring out here in the Cove, and I approached the city of Belvedere for permission to sink a mooring. They gave me permission to sink the mooring so long as I joined either San Francisco or Corinthian, and the fee was $50 for life. And because I had sailed out of Corinthian before, that's why I joined Corinthian.
In order to get a mooring out.
Because the boat was a 40-foot catamaran, tiny. Obviously, it wasn't going to fit in most marinas. At that point, I actually had it up the creek in San Rafael. But in order to get it down here, that was the city's requirement. That answer the question?
Yeah, you didn't have to go through a bunch of red tape or anything.
Well, I joined as a race member, and a few years later I got a tap on the shoulder and was told that I needed to change my status, and would $50 be okay? And I said, yeah, fine.
To become a regular member?
Yeah.
That was the fee?
Sure, $50, $200, it was a very nominal amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Had you been involved with other yacht clubs prior to the Corinthian?
Only with a single-handed sailing society, not with any other organized club.
And again, you joined primarily to get involved with the racing and to have a place.
I was racing in the bay, and I wasn't really joining the club for social reasons. When I sailed out of here in 1967, I sailed for a guy called Don Jacobs on a Lapworth 36 called Gina on D line. And at that point, as crew, after a race, you were not invited up to the bar for a drink. Only the boat owners and the club members went there. So it was 2 years of sailing for this guy before I got invited up for a drink. So, you know, my feelings with the Corinthian was, okay, not a big deal.
But there was a bit of a caste system there.
Yeah, because at that time women were not allowed on the main floor either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Did that, as you say, because your focus was on racing, it really didn't matter that much to you?
No, it was not critical. I mean, I was certainly positive about joining the club.
Right.
Okay, but my main issue was I needed a place to moor a boat, and the city said you got to have access to the boat, so you got to join one of the clubs.
So how did you evolve into ultimately going up the flag and being a staff commodore?
Probably being opinionated is the main guilty element. Okay. I was around the club a lot because having the boat here and then the boats that followed that, I was here every weekend, either racing or working on the boat or something. So you got to know a lot more people. And I think that's why I got asked to be on the board. I don't know why.
During the period that you were involved with the flag and ultimately Commodore, was there much going on politically speaking? With
Oh yeah. There were two major issues during the time I was on the flag. The first, and I'm not sure of the order of these, but the first one of them was the creation of the Corinthian Catering Company, which was, we had gone through a period of unsatisfactory food service from outside parties. And this pattern seems to repeat itself every 30 years or so. And so a group of, I think it was 18 members, put it in some capital contributions to create a new company called the Corinthian Catering Company, who provided the contract services for food here and upstairs from about 1995 to about 2005. A lot of that, and it was a very successful venture, in the sense that the objective was to return the profits from the catering company back to the club. So that's how we got the handicap elevator out there and other things where the catering company paid for it. Okay.
At that time, was the catering company the for-profit component of the club?
Good question. It was not a component of the club because under the tax rules, the club could only take 15% of its gross receipts from outside parties. Okay, and this had always been an issue. Okay? So by creating the catering company as being separate, even though it was owned by 17 or 18 members, it was not managed by the club directly. It was not owned by the club. The club had no equity interest in it. The general manager of the club was also the general manager of the catering company, and he was drawing a salary from both. Okay. So that's sort of how that came to be. And the objective was to keep it independent, but to return the profits of the catering operation, which was very profitable at that time, to the club in the way of providing more capital facilities for the club. And then what happened over time was the profitability of the catering company changed. You had a personality change in who was on the board. So you got to a point where, quite frankly, there were no CCI stockholders on the board. And when Michael Morazade became Commodore, Michael decided he wanted to take over the catering company, and so the contract was not renewed between the club and CCI. And that's when Michael created Corinthian Catering and Dining, which was nominally an independent club company, but in fact it wasn't. Okay. And I'll let Michael explain what happened after that. So the CCI, so you asked the first political issue. That was the first.
Right.
The second one was the harbour. I think it was sometime in the 90s. There was a major storm, and the breakwater, what was an old wooden breakwater, was severely damaged. And at that point, the Corinthian Harbour Company owned the harbour. So they didn't own the land, they owned the improvements. The land was owned by the club. And they ran very independently of the club. The harbour was damaged, the lease on the land was due for renewal, and the club, of which when I was on the board at that time, decided that it was in the club's interest to bring the harbour back under the management of the club. And so we opted not to renew the lease. Prior to that, we had people who had bought the right to have a berth in the club. For the highest number I ever heard was $100,000 on an A-line berth. Most of them were much less than that, but they were in the $20,000 to $30,000 that people were paying to get a berth in the club.
And non-transferable?
Well, your berth that you bought it like a share in the harbour company. You didn't technically own the berth, but you owned the right to occupy that. Okay, yeah, it was transferable, because if they wanted to flog it off, they could.
So if someone sold their boat, they could sell the slip with it?
That's correct, yeah. So it got down to a delicate issue where the harbour company was 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. They didn't want to give up the option, the scenario they had of control of the harbour, but neither did their stockholders want to put up the money to replace the breakwater. So that's when the decision was made to not renew the lease. And John Culver and I, he was the representative of the harbour company, or the agent of the harbour company doing the negotiation for them, and I was on the club side. Did not find it particularly amusing when I told him it was simply a business decision, story over. The end result? Yes, the club has benefited from bringing the harbour back into the club.
Right.
I don't think there's any argument about that now. Was it to the club's benefit when the harbour was built and through those difficult years for it to be independent? Yes.
Was it a tough decision knowing that at some point in time, sooner rather than later, you are either going to have to repair or rebuild the breakwater?
No, I think everyone knew that. I mean, they knew it was degrading, okay? It sort of, I don't think people were thinking much about it until there was a particular storm that said, oh shit, we almost lost it.
Yeah.
And if we'd lost the breakwater, we were going to lose the hub.
Yeah.
And so everyone was aware that we needed to do something right. And that was the best way to do it.
I know in prior years, we basically made changes or improvements when we had the money to do so, and then we've also learned that there was a bond that was created that several members got involved with, but they had pretty much avoided taking on any outside debt. Was the breakwater sort of the first time we had gone out and sought?
Outside debt. I'm not sure if it was the first. It was certainly one that was done. And I think, as anyone on the finance committee will tell you, that the club has the asset value that is here can support a very substantial loan. However, the cash flow can't service the debt. Has always been the problem. Okay. I think the preference was if you could fund it within the members, that was preferable to doing it outside until the breakwater came along. I don't think anyone's had any regrets from doing it outside with the breakwater. So it was just a change of time.
Now, you were, in terms of the timing, were you the Commodore when the breakwater had been damaged? And
No, I was on the board, I think, at that time, and I was Commodore when I think the final decision was made to not renew the lease. I was certainly on the flag at that time.
right.
Whether I was a vice rear or
Right.
Commodore, memory isn't that great. To do that. And then once we'd made the decision, everyone got on board.
So it was a bit later, I know, that a decision was taken that rather than go through the more traditional passing the flag, it was decided in the midst of this project that the Commodore would remain in place for the coming year. Is that what happened there?
Jeff McQueen was the Commodore at that time near the completion of the breakwater, not at the start, but near the completion. And so yes, he was on for a 2-year term. Exactly why he was on for a 2-year term, or why he was kept on the second year, I don't recall. You're implying it might have been related to the harbour? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Jeff can tell you that.
Yeah.
I was off the board by that point.
You mentioned earlier, this was largely a club for men and boat owners.
Has it changed?
Do you have any? I see quite a few women in the club. Do you recall anything in particular that might have precipitated the transition?
Oh, I think it was an absolute reality of the, hey, this is getting old, guys. This is, I mean, remember, when I talk about that, that's the 60s, 50 years ago.
Right.
Okay? By the time I joined in '84, it had changed substantially. Okay? It was still basically a white man's club. Okay? And there was a lot of active sailing here. The membership was not as large as it is now. I would say there are more social members now than there were then. But I think there was always a recognition that the viability of the club depended on both those who wished to sail and those who would support the bar and the dining room in order to make it work. I think that recognition was always there.
So while your bias is more towards racing, it's not you don't view the social side of it as being a negative. It's
absolutely a positive.
A positive.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a beautiful facility here, and not everyone wants to go out on the water, but enjoy the facility. And I'm absolutely fine with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have? Were there folks that were primarily focused on racing? Any of those folks ever have a feeling that we were losing our focus on racing and left the club as a result?
Yes, and I think that exists today. If you look at it, the midwinters have declined a little bit in participation. The Friday nights have declined a little bit. a lot of that has to do not so much with the club, but over the last 50 years of the change in the way families have operated. I mean, men used to get exactly what they wanted, and they could go off and spend their money, and the wife was meant to come along behind. That's not the case anymore. That's fine. It's okay. So yeah, the choices that families had have changed, and the club has had to adapt to it, and it's done it quite easily.
In every conversation we've had, John Culver's name comes up,
Yeah.
and we'd be interested in hearing what's your view of the role that he played, because it was pretty significant, and also he wasn't always the most popular guy, but he got things done. And just from your point of view, what was John Culver?
John and I
to
were
this
very good friends, and we were often adversaries. However, the issues that we disagreed on, we were willing to argue, and argue very strongly. We always tended to recognize one another's arguments and to be respectful of them.
Essentially agree to disagree.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can't blame him for being English, but, and John was a very persuasive character. He was also one who could get stuff done. And he had a lot of contacts with the city and other places where, when the club effectively needed an administrative pass, he would get the pass for us. Okay. So yes, John was an enormous influence in the club, extremely positive, and this dining room alone belongs to him. He was the one that drove the replacement of this from what was something that looked pretty shitty. Okay. Great guy.
Yeah, and so it sounds as though it's a combination of his contacts and his perseverance.
And then his abilities and, his social skills, and as a sailor, he was a very active sailor. John didn't harbor fools easily. Okay, he was opinionated, and he'd go to bat. And if you didn't want to stand up against him, you were going to get pushed over. You know? But if you were willing to listen to his argument, to counter his argument, he would respect it.
Looking at the club today and some of the initiatives that we're talking about, which is obviously involved with spending money, but also retaining membership and getting more members. What are your thoughts on that? I know that you've heard about the master plan, and you've gone through different iterations of that, and you know, for some, any sort of change is controversial. But as someone who has seen the club evolve, what do you think of all of that? And is it a good direction that we're headed in?
Well, yeah, we have to maintain the physical plant, and that will require changes. We have to deal with the physical changes that are happening outside it, like sea level rise. We have to protect this clubhouse, which is at some point is going to require an extension of the breakwater. We have had a hard job over the last 8 years, let's say, of identifying what the members want in terms of improvements to the club facility. It's tended to, through different regimes on the flag, to have been dictated by a handful of people. And in some senses that's necessary, because there's a lot of members who just don't want to be involved in these issues, don't want to be involved in the politics, are not particularly strong one way or the other on the opinions. Okay? So that's why when you look at the plans that have been presented, particularly say over the last 5 years, what's been done is quite different from what was planned and what was approved in 2015. I've said my bit on it from time to time, and I've been told to stay in my lane on more than one occasion. Yeah, we need to maintain the plan. Okay. I won't agree with everything that's done, but I don't think every member will either. You know?
What we're trying to achieve in sort of reactivating or pumping some steroids into the History and Artifacts Committee, this is a real important part of it, is to sustain the legacy, and part of that is talking with the people firsthand that have gone through this, and another part of it is once we assemble all of this including stuff like this. We have a veritable museum of things, and Len may have explained we're in the process of finding a spot where we can
Right.
harbor an archive and
Thanks
all
to
of
Culver, we know where it should be.
that. He may revisit it. But Len, do you have any thoughts, any questions? And,
Well, sure. First of all, because I want to get this on the record, but I will relate it to the Corinthian. You established a couple of world records in one of your rather famous boats. Did you start to finish from the Corinthian when you set these Guinness records?
Well, the only one of them actually is a Guinness record, and that is the solo passage from San Francisco to Tokyo. That was prior to the creation of the World Speed Sailing Record Council, which is an organization that keeps track of all of the race and course records around the world, okay, sailing records. So because that organization was created after I did that project in 1992, it was given to me as a Guinness record. The previous holder of that record was Eric Cavalier, okay, the French sailor. What was the question there?
Well, it was about the, I assume you flew the Corinthian Burgee.
Oh yeah, and that, yes, I did. I always flew the Corinthian Burgee, and the records that I got here on the West Coast, here to Hawaii and to Japan, were on my own boats, and always under the Corinthian flag. The records that I subsequently got in both the Atlantic and in the Pacific and other places around the world was sailing as crew for Steve Fawcett. And so in that case, it was not under the Corinthian Burgee.
Okay, I also want to hear about the disappearing boat that you had to go find in the South Pacific after returning from one of the Corinthian races.
That boat was Aotea, which was a 40-foot trimaran designed by Jim Antrim here in the Bay Area and built in up by the Pound in Novato. They launched it in 1990, and it's the one I sailed to Japan in 92, and then to set the record to Hawaii in 94, and 96, one of those years. That in the 1997 double-handed Farallon race with Jim Antrim. We were returning from the Farallons, and I'll keep the story short. We pitch-poled the boat about a mile this side of the Farallons on a very windy, gusty, stormy day. We got hit by a line squall from behind, but the end result was we got taken off by a Coast Guard helicopter. No vessel here would go out to retrieve the boat. They said it was too rough. They knew the fishing boats would go out the gate. 15 months later, I was sailing with Steve Fawcett on our record attempt from San Francisco to Tokyo, when Shama got a message from the Coast Guard that the emergency beacon on Aotea had been activated, and that the boat was on an island, an atoll called Nomwin in Micronesia. The Coast Guard knew the boat because they had been involved. They knew the idea of the EPIRB, so they knew whose boat it was. So they were not concerned. They just said, hey, the EPIRB's been activated. So once we got to Japan, I then flew down to Truck Lagoon and eventually got out to this little atoll in Nomwin, about 60 miles north of Truck Lagoon. And there she was, upside down in the lagoon of this small atoll. It was a trimaran, one armor was missing. Of course, she had the mast was long gone. And the question was, where'd she be? How one armor had got cut off on the beams was not clear. Clearly, something had hit it and cut it off. But there were two things that were interesting. The dagger board, she was upside down, so she was upside down when I left her. But the top of the dagger board had all like been filed down, like it had been stuck in sand and rubbed back and forward, and so all the bottom paint had come off and all the glass had started to come off. So clearly she'd been right way up at some time. The second thing was, on the little aft deck there were 4 chocks that held the life raft. One of those was missing. There was absolutely no reason why it would be missing unless something had been tied to it, to something else. So my supposition was that at some point she'd come right way up, someone had got her on some other atoll, and she was tied off somewhere and got away again. Okay? So the people on Nonwin, they wanted to make good on her, make good with her. At that point, Micronesia had recently become independent from the United States. And so the US had given the citizens grants to get the country up on its feet. Okay, so in this particular atoll, in which there were probably 200 people living, in each of the huts there was a 40 horsepower Yanmar outboard. They'd all put in to get a outboard because they were going to go fishing. Unfortunately, they had spent the money on the outboard, they had nothing left for the boat. So there was only one boat to go with that 40 horsepower outboard. Okay? And to get from Nonwin to Truck Lagoon was 60 miles straight across the prevailing wind. So we were sitting out on the beach one night before I left, and I'm explaining to these guys how to get the boat upright and how they can use it as a proa to go to Truck Lagoon. Of course, this is where a lot of these original designs of boats came from, in terms of the proas and trimarans and catamarans, but I had to explain a lot of this to these guys. So I was telling them, going over there from Nonwin to Truck was no problem, because the armor would be on the leeward side, the boat would be balanced, you put your outboard on the back, this is how you put it on, you've now got a good platform to go over. But coming back was a problem, because now the armor was on the windward side. So I must admit, we'd had a lot of kava by the time I got to this point in the discussion, okay? And that they needed to put 3 women on the float, the armor, in order to keep the boat balanced. And it took quite a while to explain to them why they needed 3 women. Well, the first part to explain was the need for righting moment as to how to keep the boat balanced. The second part was to explain most of the guys were about 150 pounds and the women were about 300. So that's why the women would be better for riding
Better ballast
than the guys. So that's how the boat ended up there. I left that atoll and kept in touch through a guy in Truck Lagoon. They never righted it, and eventually another storm came through and it broke up.
Is it true you encountered some kid wearing one of your
Yeah.
t-shirts?
I get off the plane, having flown from Tokyo, and the airport outside of Moen, the town in Truck Lagoon, was, I don't know, 5 miles out. And of course, there's no service to get you into town. So I hitch a ride on this pickup truck, and there's a kid sitting in the back of the pickup truck, and he's got tennis shoes on. You know, typical shoes we wear. Those are the same one here. And this kid said to me, "Yeah, they're your shoes." And he'd figured out who I was, and they had stripped the boat before that, so he had my shoes on. I thought, no problem. When I got, actually this story is interesting, when I got to Nonwin, the only way this atoll communicated with the rest of the world was single sideband radio. And their range was about 100 miles, which got them to Truck Lagoon, so they could conduct personal and business, whatever they wanted that way. The only piece of equipment on Aotea that did not suffer water damage in all that 15 months going upside down across the ocean was the single sideband antenna tuner. And that was simply because of where it was located in the hull, and the hull had been there. So they had stripped the boat when I got there. So they'd pull out, they sat me down in this hut, they'd pull out each piece of equipment, and they asked me what it was and how it worked and all this sort of stuff. So I explained to them how the antenna tuner worked, how you hooked it up, etc. Okay, they got it. No one said anything at that time. Next morning, there's a hell of a lot of noise going on in the village. Okay, they had hooked this antenna tuner up overnight, and were talking to Hawaii. So all of a sudden, the range had gone from 100 miles to 1,500 miles. We'd never seen a crowd that was so happy, just simply because they had a little bit of technology that enabled them to do it.
Yeah, to you.
Great book.
So that experience is just something that most people never have. Have you documented any of this? Did you keep a journal, or is it all up here?
That story, I think, no, that last part of it, yeah, I did. I think that was written up in well, certainly in Latitude and maybe in Motorholes magazine. There was a story that preceded that, which is the boat that I had here at Tainui, catamaran, Dick Newick designed catamaran. That one I lost during the Windjammer race to Santa Cruz in 1989, 88 or 89. Shammer and I were doing it, and we hit a whale on Nuevo that destroyed the boat. And that was how I got to get a new boat by an insurance payment, and then Jim Antrim designed what was a much better boat, and that's how AT came to be. So I've had these mistakes more than once.
To what extent are you doing any open ocean racing?
I'm not doing any open water sailing anymore. When Steve Fawcett died, that was the end of the whole routine we had with him around the world. I admit I got off into a corner of the sailing game where we were simply going after course records, speed records and what have you. It was a fantastic experience that I won't be able to repeat. My thing had always been ocean sailing, not so much in the bay. I like to be out in the ocean. And as I got older, by that point, when Steve died, I was 65. I can't do what I used to be able to do. I don't have the strength, I don't have the stamina. So I'm quite happy to let the memories stay and do other things.
When he became focused on circumnavigating the globe in the air, did he abandon sailing, or
No.
he was doing both?
He had the circumnavigation in the balloon, the circumnavigation in the plane, the circumnavigation in PlayStation, all going at the same time.
You know, you were talking about friendly and sometimes not so friendly John Culver over matters. I think
It was always friendly.
yeah.
Sometimes it was curt.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. I had the pleasure of meeting Richard Branson a couple of times, and the last time was just before he was going to make his attempt, because there was
With the
a
balloon?
real competition there, and he was noticeably more tense. He was here doing a book tour, but he was getting ready for this, and of course Fawcett beat him to it. But when he disappeared in Nevada, it was Branson who financed the search party, because they didn't find him right away.
No.
Is that?
It was not Branson.
Oh, I thought Branson had.
Branson was there. We were at Baron Hilton's ranch. I was there. Okay. It wasn't a matter of financing. Okay. Steve's family could take care of it. Baron Hilton could take care of it. Richard could pay his share if he wanted to. It would be inaccurate to say that the search for Steve was financed by Richard Branson. That he was a contributor, for sure. Was he the sole one? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Separate from that, to do us back to you and sailing in the Corinthian. You and your wife have long been involved with the Single-Handed Sailing Society, and I know Shama has run it or did for years and so on. So my question, out of sheer curiosity, what got you into single-handed? I mean, you've crossed the Pacific at the top of a mast all by your lonesome, and I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is wrong with this guy? How did that get started?
In 1977, I helped a friend with one other guy, three of us, deliver a boat from here to the Caribbean. The boat was a Freya, a 39-footer built in Australia, only boat to win the Sydney Hobart race 3 times. And as a result of that experience, I decided I wanted to go faster, which is what got me into multi-hulls. Okay? And at that point, Phil Weld had won the 1980 O-Star race, single-handed transatlantic race, first American to win the race. And so when I came back from that trip, I chartered Chuck Holly's Moore 24 to do some races offshore here. Okay, single-handed races to the Farallones. And I just thought, hey, that was cool. So after that, it was just a matter of upping the ante. To me, the single-handing was interesting because of the challenge to actually sail the boat, but as much also the mental challenge about it was something I found interesting and rewarding. So that's why I sort of got off from that group. But you might say no one else would sail with me, and some might say that.
Throughout your history of sailing, have you suffered any injuries, and was there ever a time where you were sailing not sure you were going to make it?
Well, yeah. When we hit the whale, I thought the whale was going to win that one. When I was qualifying for the 1984 single-handed Transpac offshore here, I had an incident where I got hurt, physically hurt, that I didn't think I was going to be able to get back in on. When we flipped a tier, yeah, that one was pretty marginal, okay, when going end over end. With Fawcett, no, because that was all crude work. We had some marginal situations, but did I feel that, I was running out of time? No.
What would you envision, to come back to the club itself, what's the best route for the Corinthian Yacht Club now to enter this century?
The best what?
The best route. What's the best thing for us to be?
We don't want to pretend to be what the other clubs are. Okay? San Francisco and St. Francis are the racing clubs. Richmond is for the younger kids, to learn kids how to sail. St. Francis is this big social club, and San Francisco to a lesser level. We're a club that has an interest in sailing with a great facility. Let's not try to compete with the other clubs, because we will never succeed. Case in point, in the 30 years, or nearly 30 years that I have been a member here, we have tried from time to time to create a junior sailing program, and it has never got off the ground. Okay? Partially because there hasn't been enough kids, partially because it hasn't had enough support, but we don't need a junior sailing program. If someone's kid needs, and we have a relationship with San Francisco, so they can do it over there, okay? That's not our gig, okay? I think this club should recognize that it's going to be a social club with an emphasis on sailing, or on and not just sailing, could be motorboats, what have you, and not try and pretend to be anything else. Won't happen. Did I answer your question, Lynn?
Sort of, kind of. I was just thinking, gosh, Rooney, we ought to turn Pneumonia Alley into a...
Let's just discount that one way. It's not going to happen because the city won't let you do it because of the potential impact of sea level rise. But in terms of turning it into office space or WeWork space down there so people don't have to take the ferry, not a good idea. We do still need the lockers to support the harbour, and the archives room should be in lockers 1 and 2. Did you get that?
Yeah.
You can edit these out, yeah.
No, I'll put that in 3 times.
Huh?
I'll put that in 3 times.
Just so you know, one of the things that we're in the process of doing is recreating, digitizing essentially the 1986 book that was put
okay.
together.
Yeah.
And I know through the membership committee, as new members come on board, they get a kit, and that's going to be part of it. So that's again another thing that we're trying.
Oh, so instead of reprinting it, you're going to digitize it?
Digitize, well, and come up, there will be a
Bring it up
hard
to
copy
date?
version. But initially, no, it will be up to
Okay.
1986.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, it would be good to bring it
Sure.
up to date. But I think the most important thing is it gives one a pretty good idea of how we got here.
Yeah. No, it's a great book.
And so that's been reactivated as well. We're also going through our archives of pictures, and some have some water damage, and so the archive will be a compendium of things, and then once we've completed our interviews, which will go on into the new year, we're going to cobble them together and edit them, and because every one of these conversations that we have, we get another little nugget
sure.
of information.
Yeah.
One thing you haven't talked about at all, it seems to come up amongst certain of the folks we've talked to, is the cooks and waiters.
I don't give a shit about that. The cooks and waiters degraded in the time that I've been here, whereby they were playing poker and showing porn films. And to me, that's not my thing. Okay, end of story.
Yeah. Well, it's really nice to get your perspective. Like I said, I'm a relatively new member, having joined in 2006, but I've been quite interested in learning more about how we got to where we are,
Yeah.
and really appreciate you taking the time to. And if you think of anything else, we've had a couple of guys that, no, I've got something more.
I got some more, I know that's happened. But I would say, when you look at the original founding of the club, the people who came out of San Francisco Yacht Club because they wanted something that was lower key, less formal, not having paid skippers and what have you. That's where we came from. That's where we should stay. We don't need to compete with the others.
And it survived, because
Oh, yeah,
there were
absolutely.
moments where clearly there were financial issues. You could have had a group of people said, "I'm done. I'll just go somewhere else."
Yeah, I mean, we had one year where there was not too well disguised move at the annual meeting to get control of the club and sell it. Okay, unfortunately, that didn't get very far. I think we're looking back over the last 30 years where we are now. I think we're in good shape. I think there are not major political issues. There are not major financial issues. I mean, what needs to be done and the funding that needs to be put together, it can happen. And the improvements can be done on an appropriate schedule. No, I think the club's in fine shape.
Yeah.
What does happen is the emphasis of the club moves progressively. I mean, and that's good. You don't want to always to have one flavor year after year after year.
You want a dynamism to it, yeah, rather than being static.
Yeah, I mean, so you get a period where, okay, the cruising, okay, becomes a focus, and people are going out cruising, which basically means going and get drunk at some other place, okay? So that takes effort. So you have a situation where the racing becomes particularly strong, or the running of regattas for national championships or something like that. To me, the important thing is that there's always this transition going on,
Right.
and that way it will appeal to everyone over time.
Peter, thank you.
Thank you
Good.
very much.
Thank you. That's great. Terrific. Will you be posting this by Monday?
No rush.